menace to sobriety. Just a menace, just a menace.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Menace to Sobriety with your host Dan O'Reilly, aka Dapper Laughs. What's going on, people? Super excited to be here. Bit of a different episode for you this week. I'm trying to chop it up each week to find out what you guys like and just to keep you entertained and engaged. I'll get into that into a second. But yes, for those of you that are just tuning in for the first time, this is your weekly check-in. This is a time for you to have a little bit of a think about what's going on in your life, take a little step out of it, look at your mental health toolkit, your well-being toolkit, and just check that you're on the right track, you know, thinking outside of the box of what's going on. This week, I'm actually joined by a guest. If you're listening, you won't be able to hear them because it's a dog. But if you are viewing, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see there's a little Yorkie sat next to me. This is my mother-in-law's dog. This is Shelley's parents' dog. And I couldn't leave the dog on its own, so it's had to join me here in the podcast studio. But we're looking after her while the in-laws are on holiday, which is nice. And me and this dog go back years. I first met this dog when I stayed over at Shelley's house once, and the dog didn't like me. Slept in between us in the bed, and every time I leaned in for a little smooch or something with Shelley, it growled. So yeah, I like to call this dog the cock block. But failed in its mission 3 kids later. But here is Millie sat next to me and just sleeping. If you're listening, you're missing out on the beauty of this dog. It's a beautiful little thing. Anyway, moving on. What's this episode about? This is the story of how I become an addict. Now, there's a reason why I wanted to get into this. All this week I've been thinking about when was the moment things changed for me, because I look at everyone out there having a good time, still being able to socially drink and occasionally sesh. I mean, I don't know. I used to think if you can still occasionally sesh at my age, you're all right. But I mean, should you be doing that in your 40s? I don't know. Does that mean you got a problem? I don't know. If it's occasionally, who knows? But I look at all these people around me that don't seem to have a problem with it. And I wonder to myself, when did it all go wrong? So I wanted to take a bit of a trip down memory lane on this one. This is like story time. So last week, I don't know if you saw it, I'd done the top 10 things you've got to do to stay sober. So that was like bite-sized information for you. This one's going to be a little bit nostalgic on my part. I'm going to set out to see when things sort of changed for me throughout my whole life, my whole relationship with alcohol. First of all, what is addiction, right? Because loads of people describe it in different ways, right? So I want to work out when that changed for me. Before I can work out when it changed for me, we've got to really put our finger on what it is, what I'm talking about, the changes. And I believe that addiction is that once you start using substances or once you start using alcohol or drugs, once you get into it and you start drinking, that you lose control and you kind of fall into oblivion. And also, I believe it's when alcohol or drugs have a negative effect on your life, but you still continue to use them or do them, like if drinking or using drugs is ruining your relationship, and it is, you don't want it to ruin your relationship with your partner, but you continue anyway, then it's a problem, then it's an addiction. That's why I believe the root of it is, it's kind of, when you have compulsive behavior around something that's destructive. So I'm going to put my finger on that, because there must have been a point in my life where it was just take it or leave it. And a big question that I want to ask you guys out there that are listening, and I want you to really think about this and maybe come back to me in the comments with this. I get confused sometimes where I think, did I become an addict later on in life, or was I always an addict? But the only difference is life caught up with me, responsibilities, and my life changed. So it became more obvious that I had a problem because I wasn't in an environment anymore that I could get away with it. Or did I turn into an addict? Do you know what I mean? Has my behaviour always been the same, except for later on in life, that behaviour just became unacceptable? And it's a really important question. I want you to ask yourselves as well. So the reason why we're going to go on this trip down memory lane in my life is each stage of my life that I get to, I want you to think of it in your terms, in your life. All right. So I'm going to start off with my childhood, and I'm going to have a little think about what alcohol played a part in my childhood. And I want you to think, are we similar? What was your experiences when you were that age? Is this journey dissimilar to yours? First up, when you talk about childhood, I think one of the big problems that we have in the UK especially is that alcohol is glorified. I think that we are socially conditioned as a child to look forward to drinking. Does that make sense? So it's like a coming of age thing. So when you're a young child, you look forward to being able to drink. You look forward to being 18 and going to a pub. It's like a coming of age thing. But not just that. To me, I associated good times with alcohol because every time I saw my parents having a good time, they were drinking. Every time I saw my family together at a party having a good time, they were drinking. Now, I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm saying culturally, this is the way of the world. You know, this is the way it is. Birthdays, christenings, when your families get together, they're drinking. Christmas, they're drinking. And you look at that, and as a kid, you're kind of the odd one out. You're not drinking. So you do look forward to it. So my childhood was always, when am I going to start drinking, or doing this at family parties, sneaking around and having little sips out of the drinks, or taking. I don't know if that is normal behaviour, by the way. I'm asking. And again, write in the chat box if you're on the Premier or in the comments on some of my social media, so I can. I really want to do this sort of piece of self-discovery to find out if you guys are similar. This is like a common denominator again around people that found themselves struggling later on in life. When you were a kid, did you sneak around, sipping the little bits of drink out of the beer cans and empty things at Christmas and stuff like that? Did you look forward to when you'd be able to go to the pub for the first time and stuff like that? Was it like a big thing to you? Because it was for me. And then from my childhood, when I got into school, moving into like a sort of different area of my life, and I'm just trying to take alcohol through my whole life. When I was at school, maybe year 9, something like that, 14, 15 years old, around 14 or 15 years old. I'd definitely say 14 years old sounds like about the right. I think I lost my V plates around 14, 15. So it was about that sort of age that we were all out drinking. And school, again, tell me if you can relate to this. School was all about looking forward to the weekend around this sort of age. I think maybe there was different types of groups of people, but for me and my friends, it was all about house parties. Who's got a house party? And the big one, who can get booze? It was a big thing for kids at my school. Everyone wanted to get home, get changed, and get back out on a Friday night, get down the park. And this is back in the years of hooch, drinking hooch. So you get the lemon, the orange, or the strawberry flavoured hooches. God, Smirnoff Ice. We used to get the big bottles of Smirnoff Ice, bottles of cider. We used to deflug the bottles of cider, so you'd be smoking. I remember we used to try and get a bottle of White Lightning and 20 like Marlboro or Super King Lights or something like that, or Sovereigns, 10 Sovereigns, or Mayfair Blues. And we used to take deflug, so you'd smoke a cigarette, and then you'd down the cider and spin at the same time. Oh my God, think about it. What were we trying to do? We were just trying to get a crazy feeling of being all over the place, from spinning, from the alcohol, from the smoke, from the crazy kids. And that was every weekend at school. It was always like, who can get booze? When's the next house party? Also, stealing booze off my parents. This was a big one. Let me know if you guys did this as well. So when I'm thinking about it, I used to go to my mum and dad's drink cabinet, or the wine, or like the whiskey, the vodka, and all of that stuff. And I used to get an empty bottle, like a Coke bottle, and I didn't know what I was doing. Obviously, it was terrible, but I used to get like a little bit of vodka, pour it in there, a little bit of Jack Daniels, pour it in there, a little bit of Baileys, pour it in there, a little bit of wine. Didn't know what I was doing. It'd be in a drink, and it's like a thing, because they wouldn't see. If you took a little bit of everything, they wouldn't notice. And then get a little bottle, and I'd take that out, and I'd be drinking that. I mean, Jesus Christ, alcohol poisoning galore, and it would wreck you. But that was at a young age that we had this affinity with booze and drinking, house parties. Around that same sort of time as well, my friends, and again, I don't know if you were anything like that, were, I say experimenting. They weren't experimenting. They were smoking the old ganja. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to be careful with what I say on the YouTube video, not to get it banned. But yeah, that was a big one. Squidgy Black and all of that stuff. And that kind of went hand in hand in it. And that's when I was 15, 16 that the alcohol really sort of ramped up for me. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pinpoint along this journey when it became dangerous or an issue for me, or the addiction kicked in, because that was still take it or leave it, but it was every time we went out socially we got smashed. Now, I moved out when I was about 16 years old, and I reckon this played quite a pivotal part in in my journey, just because my parents moved away. My mum moved to Cornwall. My dad lived in Guernsey, so I lived on my own between the age of 15 and 16. I think I was just turning 16, and I was just about to start college. I ended up getting a job and then renting a bit of accommodation off my uncle, and then I had free reign. So I had the free house, and that was for a couple of years, 16, 17, 18. It was wherever we were going, everyone was always coming back to mine and we were drinking. So yeah, no responsibilities, no parents about that. Definitely must have played a part in pushing it a little bit. And then college was a big one for me because you met new people. Obviously, there's a lot of drinking going on, pubs, nights out. I was out chasing girls at this point. And then I can remember through my college years, the hangovers were heavy. I knew I was really sort of drinking quite heavy. And when I'm thinking about it now, it's kind of like my whole life has been this kind of journey where I think I've always been on the smash. So going back to that question that I asked at the beginning, if you're anything like me, like, have we always been addicts? Have I always been an addict? Because I've always been on the smash. I'm trying to think to myself a time when I haven't. I mean, even after college, when I got into my 20s, I can remember I wanted to be an actor. So I was at college doing acting and stuff like that. And we was going out and drinking. And shortly after college finished, I thought I was going to become an actor. But, that, I had to audition for things and I never got a job. Do you know what I mean? I never got any auditions. And it was like, right, so, you have to pay the bills. So I was working at a go-kart track. But I was getting a little bit older and I was like, mate, I can't work at a go-kart track forever. So I remember someone saying that I'd be good at sales. And then I looked at the different sales jobs that you could get. And, you could like do recruitment or like product sales. But estate agency, you got a car. And I can remember I needed a car. So I was like, well, if I become an estate agent, they give you a company car as well. Bob's your father's brother. Fanny's your aunt Yorovsky. So I became an estate agent for a little bit. And I wanted a better car, so I moved on to car sales. So I worked for Toyota selling cars, but then it weren't as good money as I was making as an estate agent because I was better at selling houses. So I moved back to selling houses. And I'd done that for about 2 or 3 years till I was about 20 or 2 years till I was 20. And I got really good at it and started earning good money, which scared the life out of me because I thought I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. So that's when I headed off on my first big adventure that was just pure alcohol fueled, and I went to Cyprus to do entertainment. And in Cyprus, my drinking really did get dangerous. I can remember that I was passing out a lot, drinking in clubs. I was working in Ayia Napa in a fancy hotel doing entertainment, and that was all based around alcohol as well. But in the evening, I was working in a nightclub as an MC on a microphone, and I used to get hammered every night. And I think around this sort of time in my early 20s was the first sort of time that my drinking kind of affected me professionally. Because I can remember I lost my job in that hotel. It's all a bit of a blur from my Cyprus days, but I lost my job in the hotel at one point because of my drinking, and I had to get a job in another hotel, and also I was having these horrific hangovers and I was passing out in the middle of Ayia Napa from drinking too much. So I was, but at the time it was all fun. It was just fun and games. I was just enjoying myself. But I can remember that I was lucky to get an opportunity in Cyprus because someone from the cruise ship company noticed me, saw me, spotted me out there doing game shows. So I was standing up and doing game shows, and someone spotted me and got me an audition on a cruise ship, and then I ended up working on the cruise ships. But prior to getting spotted, on the lead up to that, I'd been thrown out of one hotel. I was on the verge of getting fired from another hotel. I was in all sorts of trouble for drinking, just disorderly conduct and just being a wreck. And I can remember actually because I used to write to my mum. I can remember writing to my mum and saying to my mum, man, I'm just hanging. It feels like it's been like, I don't know, like months of drinking. And I can remember saying to her, it's killing me. It's actually quite hard out here just because of the drinking. But then looking at other people, when I look back at other people that were working out there around me in Cyprus, they were doing nice things in the days, like they were getting mopeds and exploring the island and going to different beaches and da-da-da. My days, I was just hanging and like just trying to get through the work and then partying again at night. So that was in my 20s, so quite risky behaviour there. And definitely the blackouts were dangerous and should have been, alarm bells. But yeah, I can remember I passed out in a nightclub once, and then the next day I got fired from my job, and I can remember hitting a bit of a rock bottom then in my 20s and being like, oh my God, I'm going to lose all this. I've got to go home probably. But luckily I got a job in another hotel. But I can remember thinking, a bit confused what was going on, because, yeah, so a little bit of a rock bottom in my 20s, saved by opportunity, getting a job in the cruise ships. And I think more so that it was because it was such a professional environment on the cruise ships. You had to, dress really well. You had to be all professional with the customers. It's like they were on holiday. It was like you in this big ship. There's a lot of training around how to behave, like your etiquette, what you can and can't say. There was a big team. I had like a really hands-on boss, the cruise director. You were part of an entertainment team. There was a heavy schedule every day. We were meeting and greeting. One of the jobs that we had to do was welcome people on and off the ship. Then we had to do like the daytime activities, all the sports, and then I hosted the big shows in the evening and done the game shows. And it felt like such a massive opportunity for me. But the drinking was still there. We had the crew bar, and we were in a different port every few nights. Do you know what I mean? In the first year of working on the cruise ships, I travelled around the whole world twice, and I had a lot of money. As a young kid, I was getting like 4 or 5 grand a month, and I was young. I was in like 20, 21, and the food was paid for and my accommodation was paid for. So it was just drink and play money. Even more so when I come home. I can remember that I used to gamble it when I come home, which is obviously worrying signs there. But the cruise ships, there was a lot of drinking, and there was a high turnover of staff on the cruise ship. So I met a lot of people. But we had the crew bar. Shows at night, I was allowed to have a drink when I was watching the show. I can remember I always used to go to the bar and get a Jack Daniels and Coke, and I'd sit at the side and I'd introduce the show from the side. Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime. And I can remember I always had my Jack and Coke, and I'd drink one Jack and Coke before I went on stage, and it would like just loosen me up, which is something that progressed as I got a little bit older, especially in entertainment. But the big shows, the ports, everything, I think it was just the 20s. Just my lifestyle, all my 20 to 25, I was drinking. So at this point, I've been drinking through school, college, my 20s, and I think becoming towards the end of my 20s, coming into my 30s, when I become Dapper Laughs. I'm not sure how old I was. It was about 14 years ago. What am I now? I'm 40, so about 26, 25, or 24, about 24, 25. So after the cruise ship, when I come back, and I came back and I moved to Clapham, and me and 3 of my mates moved into this big house that we called the Rascal's Nest. So we got a big house. Downstairs we put a pool table, and the 3 lads that I moved in with, heavy sessions, and it was Clapham. I started working as an estate agent again. Clapham, anyone that's been in that area, there's a lot of expats, Australians, stuff like that, and it's all nightclubs and bars, and there's a scene. The summer, it's great. Clapham was our spot, and for a good 2-3 years, maybe even longer, we lived in this house. Maybe 4 years we lived in this house, and it was called the Rascal's Nest. It was mayhem. It was partying, session. It was good. It was good times, but it was mayhem, and yeah, a lot of session, a lot of wild behaviour. And that's when I became Dapper Laughs, in the mix of all of that stuff. And I think that made life quite difficult for me, because I was into my drinking and session with my mates, but now people were starting to recognise me. I had a different persona online to what I was like. Dapper Laughs was a real extension of who I was. It was a real far out kind of exaggerated version of lad culture. I wanted to do real lad type humour, extreme comedy, like controversial comedy, and the Dapper Laughs character, the name and everything, it gave me an ability to detach it from myself. But it was very difficult for me when I met people in public, because I'd just be sat with my mates, especially at the beginning, because all my catchphrases and the way I was wild online. When people saw me, they brought that to me. They were like, "Hey, proper moischinos, oi, oi," and they was really in my face, And I'd had this persona on social media. I could really put on, for the comedy sketches, I could really put on a persona, and I could craft it and come up with the comedy content on my phone. But when I met people in real life, it intimidated me at first. I was a bit nervous about what was going on. I can remember at some point it just felt like it changed, where I'd just walk into bars and everyone would know who I was. Because when my Vines came out, no one else had done that really. And it was really intense. And I can remember drinking. I can remember drinking and just thinking, you put the persona on, put the persona. It's just easier than just going, oh man, I'm out with my mates, or easy, or can you calm down, or I'm not really like that. It's for the camera. It was just easy to get smashed with them and to put the persona on and act that way. When I was around those people, play up to it. It was just easier for me. But I needed to drink through that, and that I do feel that there was a change when I became Dapper Laughs, when I became famous. I hate saying it because it's cringy, but certainly well known or notorious. I guess there's a little bit of social media fame with it. But when people started noticing me and I was out, I drank more, definitely, to sort of shake that feeling of eyes on me, which I never felt comfortable with. But then when the meet and greet started with Dapper Laughs, that's when I really excelled my drinking. When we used to do meet and greets, this was when I got a management company. They was like, right, we need to make money out of this. The nightclubs will have you. People will queue up to meet you. Basically, the nightclubs make money by saying that I'm coming. I'll go there, people queue up and get the selfie. That was like selling selfies, more or less. But they'd pay me. The nightclub would pay me, not the people. And it was decent money. They'd give me a couple of grand to go down there. And I was doing like 4 of these a week on top of everything else I was doing. But I could never get my head around why it was happening. I could never really understand why it was happening. It was very surreal. It must have been weird for my friends, but it was a very surreal thing for me to turn up at a nightclub, just walk straight in, have all the drinks and VIP and everything laid out for you, and then have a queue of people to meet and greet. So they queue up and they get a picture. They'd all be shouting catchphrases and the stuff at you, all the persona stuff. It would all be really quite intense. And I remember I always used to say for my rider, a bottle of tequila and loads of beers, because I'd literally be doing shots of tequila in between pictures. I'd do 2-3 pictures, shot of tequila, 2-3 pictures, shot of tequila, 2-3 pictures, shot of tequila, beers, tequila. I would get plastered. And I mean, like, I thought part of the job was to get plastered as well. And I'd get carried out of these things. I mean, what it must have looked like back in the day where everyone else was hammered as well. But I used to get carried out of them. So 100% it excelled my drinking then to a really unhealthy level. But I think more importantly, if I can put my finger on it, it was definitely escapism. And I think this is when things started to turn a little bit dangerous for me, around this Dapper Laughs era. And you might be able to relate this to something that happened in your life, or a time in your life where you were uncomfortable being yourself. It's a big part of sobriety, and it's a massive part of addiction, I believe, when at some point we become uncomfortable with being ourselves, right? And the drink and the drugs are escapism for it, or can create someone else on the outside, a persona. And what happened next for me as Dapper Laughs, when I was already, I mean, this is really good. This is a really good conversation to have. I don't know how interesting you're finding this, but I'm really sort of kind of unpicking stuff in my mind now that I haven't really looked at and thought about. But it makes sense that if I was drinking so much when I became Dapper Laughs, and then what happened next, getting cancelled, and the character that I'd created and the persona that was escapism from myself, and the alcohol that was escapism from the world, seeing that, once the character and the work and the fame and all of that got cancelled, and it became embarrassing being that guy, oh my God, it was so much harder to be in public. It was so much harder to be out. It was harder to have the criticism, to get the constant criticism online, to get the criticism from people in public. That is when that was a massive rock bottom. This is probably my second big rock bottom in my life. I mean, I'm sure I've had more that I can't pinpoint because I've been a wreck, but that rock bottom of getting cancelled was where my drinking went from outside socially to inside on my own, purely because I just didn't want to be at the pub. I always associated drinking and doing drugs with having a good time. So when my life was bad and I was having a bad time or bad things were happening to me, I was like, I'll just get smashed. I'll make myself feel better by getting drunk because, that's fun. And it works, doesn't it? It works for a short amount of time. It works where you drink, you lose your inhibitions and you're like, fuck it, whatever, who cares? I'm drinking, I'm getting smashed, we're partying, you start acting silly. And the next thing you've forgotten about everything and you're just drunk. And normally you do it with people, so you get the company. But I didn't want to be out and I didn't want to be around people. I was embarrassed that I was who I was, even more so before I was even Dapper Laughs. I wasn't quite sure who I was, but I was struggling to just be alive, to be here. I was like, I didn't want to be out. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want people to go, oh my God, it's so bad. What happened to you? Oh my God. Or yeah, why did you say that? Why did you do that? Or have the eyes, the judgmental eyes, whatever. So I'd go and do whatever I had to do in the day. And then I'd drink at home. I'd go home. I had a pal of mine that I lived with, Matty. We shared a flat together. Every night we'd have a couple of bottles of red wine, and every now and then we'd have a sesh. And 9 times out of 10 we'd have a sesh. You know what I mean? And I think that it really excelled during that rock bottom, because I know I've told this story before. Shortly after getting cancelled, my father passed away, and I definitely, because I was moved in with Shelley, I was drinking in excess through the cancellation. I'd moved in with Shelley, and my father had passed away. I found out Shelley was pregnant. I couldn't cope with it all, and I went completely off the rails. That was when the rock bottom that I had, when I lost everything as Dapper Laughs. I got cancelled. My TV show got cancelled. Lost all my money and couldn't gig. Had my tour cancelled. That rock bottom I felt like was the worst. Like, I was like, fuck, I fucked everything up. I'm just drinking. I don't know what's going to happen next. And I honestly, and this is where I think things get dangerous with, like, wanting to take your own life and stuff like that, is I'd hit what I thought was the lowest point in my life, and I was drinking to make myself feel better, and I didn't think it could get any worse. There was no way it could get any worse. And then my dad died, and it was like there was a basement level. There was like a deeper level where it was like, wow, this is bad. And that rock bottom, after that rock bottom in such close vicinity, cracked sank in me. I know it did. And if I could pinpoint the moment that I became a full-blown addict, I think it's somewhere amongst that period in my life, because I stopped caring about drinking too much. Or because before that I knew it was kind of wrong, and I was like, look, try to chill, blah, blah. After that I just didn't care. I just needed it. And that time around my father passing away was so destructive. I mean, like, the things I was doing was crazy. I was, taking all me stepmom's prescription antidepressants and bloody Valiums and just pills and drink, drugs, everything, like, during the day. And it was just getting, like, wrong. And then I couldn't cope, and I couldn't cope with Shelley. So, bad times, broke up with Shelley. That took a long time to fix. Shelley was pregnant. And this is the point where I think it becomes a serious addiction, because you've got to stop and you can't, right? You've got to stop and you can't. So all of these things can happen to you in your life. You can go through all of this stuff and these different stages of drinking, but the difference between us, if you're like me and you struggle with a relationship with alcohol and drugs, is when all of these things happen in your life, other people can go, look, the drink ain't serving me, and leave it. Or through school and college and their 20s, it simmers out. The hard sessions simmer out. You know what I mean? If you're in your 40s now, I've just hit 40, and you're still hard session, you've got problems, man. I don't care what anyone says. You've got issues. If you're still hardcore session every weekend, it's not normal, right? And, we lie to ourselves, and the culture tells us it is normal. It's not normal. You should not be wrecked all week because you've sessioned at the weekend, and then just as at the point that you're starting to feel normal again, you get back on the roller coaster. It's no way to live. It's addiction. People think, I always say this, addiction is the quantity, the frequency of your use. People think addiction is the frequency of your use that you use every day. That makes you an addict. It doesn't. It's what happens when you use. So you use and it goes off the Richter scale, and then you recover for 4 days. Just because you're hungover for 4 days or 3 days and you can't bear the thought of drinking for those 3 or 4 days does not mean that you're not an addict. It just means that you've poisoned yourself and you can't take any more. And then as soon as you feel better, you go again. There's just levels to it. And I think this is the transition for me. This was the transition. I hit my rock bottom. I needed drink and drugs to escape life, especially after my father died. And I leaned into it, and it was getting out of control. And when the next phase of my life happened, this is where I believe it. I believe now I'm looking at it. That question I asked at the beginning, was I always an addict, or did life just catch up with me? Was I always an addict, or later on in life, did I turn into an addict? Was I always an addict? It was just growing up, it was accepted because everyone was getting smashed. At college, it was accepted because everyone was going out at pubs and nightclubs and chasing girls and whatever. In the 20s, I was in Cyprus and everyone was getting smashed. So it was hidden. Do you know what I mean? On the cruise ships, everyone was drinking. I became Dapper Laughs in an industry where everyone drinks and does drugs, and then, have I always been an addict? I think I have always been an addict. It's just been hidden because of the way my life panned out. And because of culture, because I think I always have. But I think that the moment that I realised it was a problem was when life caught up with me and I had children. So yeah, sorry, I'm just going on a rant here about it. It's like a little bit of self-discovery, but, I think that it just became obvious that it was a problem when I had kids. I think I've always been an addict, and I just noticed it when I had kids because suddenly my behaviour was affecting other people more. I should have noticed it with Shelley because it was destroying our relationship, but she was in the mix of it as well, not with the other stuff, but we used to drink together. And she was, we had a big social circle and it was kind of the norm, I'd be out saying I was working, and she kind of put up with it until she didn't put up with it. And she didn't put up with it when we started having kids, right? Because she needed me. She needed me there. I needed to be there for the kids. So, I started this podcast asking, did I become an addict or was I always an addict? And I believe that my drinking has always been unhealthy, and I always have been an addict. It's always been in me to drink at excess, regardless of the negative effects that it has on me, my work, my surroundings. It's been affecting my work, my relationships with people, my mental health, my whole life, 100%. But having kids just put it at the forefront. And I think the big thing for me was, when people started saying it was a problem, my dad, before he died, said, "Dad, son, you got a drinking problem. You're always drunk. You're drinking too much." And I can remember we went away to Vegas, and yeah, I really regret this. It was the last holiday that I went away with my dad on, and we went to Vegas. It was something my little brother wanted to do, me, my brother, and my dad. And I really think it affected the relationship with me and my brother because we never really spoke, we haven't spoken a lot since. And my father passed away shortly after. But when we flew to Vegas on the plane on the way there, I was so excited that I got smashed. And I was going through difficult times. This was after I'd just got cancelled, right? So this was in between getting cancelled and my father passing away. In that small period of time, we flew to Vegas. And I got on the plane and I got absolutely hammered, passed out, woke up. It's a long flight, woke up, got hammered again and passed out. So I had 2 piss-ups on the plane just out there. And then when we arrived, got to the hotel. They wanted to go and rest because the next day, we had a whole day of activities. We were going to the Grand Canyon and doing all this stuff. But I didn't want to do that when we arrived. I was like, we're in Vegas. I had one thing on my mind. I just wanted to get off me nut, get on the old ding-dang-do and do a bit of gambling. So they went to the hotel room. I said, I'll be back in a bit. And I disappeared for like nearly 3 days. I think the first 2 or 3 days of the holiday, they were ringing Shelley. They were ringing back home saying they couldn't find me. Now, I didn't know it was that much time. I was just enjoying myself. But by the time I got back to the hotel room, all hell had broken loose, and I'd ruined the beginning of the holiday. Then, my dad said that he thinks I've got a problem, and then I was like, I haven't. And then, the next day I was like, well, I'm going to have a drink because we're on holiday, so I'm going to still I'd have a beer. And he was shocked that I was still drinking the next day after all of that had happened. And I can remember him saying, mate, this ain't right. But it never did click. And my father passed away shortly after that, and things got worse. But, having kids, as painful as it was, made me realise, well, it didn't make me realise straight away. Shelley realised. And that battle that over the last couple of years, this adult life that I've had, trying to manage the mortgage, bills, work, being a father, stress, all of that stuff was getting to me. I wasn't really managing it very well. I was still drinking a lot. Lockdown really escalated things. I don't know if you guys remember, but I came up with the idea of having a beer brand called Laughs Beer, and this really tipped me over the edge. I mean, what Shelley must have thought after all these years of carnage. I'm releasing a barrel of beer. It was called a Barrel of Laughs. It was called Laughs Beer. We went out to the brewery, we found it, everything, tested it, and every Friday I'll do these live streams through lockdown where I'll be live streaming, drinking the beer, drinking whiskey, and doing whatever else. I think any of you that saw the live streams would have seen. I mean, there was people, friends of mine, messaging me. I saw one the other day actually that said that he was planning an intervention from watching them live streams because apparently I looked that off me nut. But I was drinking everything. I was selling this beer, and it was my excuse every week: promote the beer, sell the beer. Oh, and things got well out of hand through that, and that was when Shelley said, right, I think you've got an issue. It's got to stop. I went sober for her and then decided to come back, and the rest is history. When I decided to come back, I mean, when I went sober, I still didn't think I had a problem. But when I decided to come back for Christmas to have a few beers, and I said I'd stay off the ding dang do, but I'd just have the beers, the escalation of my problem through that period was so intense. I was like, I knew that it was an issue, so I tried to consume as much of it as I could. I knew then, that's when I knew, wow, you're an addict, because you can't control this. You're going off the Richter scale, and that's it. In the overnight like that, I was kicked out. I'd upset everyone, and my family, that was it. It was gone. I couldn't go and see Shelley. She didn't have nothing to do with me. I didn't know when I was going to see the kids, and rehab, baby. So that is the story of how I became an addict. I mean, what a trip down memory lane. And I like the fact that we went through that. I feel a little bit like shaky from it. But at the beginning, I thought to myself, I just want to try and break down all the periods in my life, all the different times throughout my life that alcohol has been a problem, and try and pinpoint when it started, when it became more of an issue, when it changed into an addiction. Mate, looking back even from school, it's always been an issue. I've always been getting on the smash constantly. I just think it's our culture, and some of us can stop and some of us can't, and it's the addicts that can't. And I really want to know if you guys can relate to any of that on the YouTube comments, and if that did ring true, and if that's unpicked anything in your mind, if that's made you sort of look back and go, fucking yeah, it's not recent, it's always been a bit of an issue. Maybe it is built in us. It is us. Some of us just need to escape ourselves too much, and some of us maybe just have low dopamine levels with ADHD, or it could be anything like that. But there is something different about some of us that we just can't. It can't just be one or two. We can't just start and do it calmly. And I'm just visualizing the younger me, and he used to drink the same as the me 3 years ago, 2 years ago. There's no difference to 17-year-old me and 37-year-old me. That's the same person, except for 37-year-old me had a hell of a lot more trauma and embarrassment and shame and guilt to hide from. So although it's the same person, the 37-year-old me was just a hell of a lot more damaged and had a hell of a lot more to consume in order to actually escape. So there you go. Right, I'm going to finish it there because I'm getting a bit emosh. But listen, please do leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of that episode. There's different I'm really just playing with this. Whether it's like last week, which was really scripted, and I wrote some hardcore information and really thought about 10 things that I thought could help you, or whether it's like this storytelling time. I'm testing different things. I want you to let me know what you prefer, whether you think the guests should come back, whether you like this kind of unscripted, free flow, free thinking way of podcasting, or if you want to go back to, come on, give us some facts, give us something that we can take away. But yeah, that's another episode. And I love you. I hope that I've managed to distract you from whatever's going on in your nut. And remember, we are not missing out. We are free of it. Our weekends are now a blessing. So wherever you are listening or watching this, just have a look around you and realise that your sobriety may be hard, but it's nowhere near as difficult as it was when you were on the smash constantly and feeling bad about it. I love you. Let me know your thoughts. That was another Menace to Sobriety. Bye for now. If you're going through a tough time at the moment, please don't suffer in silence. Feel free to pick up the phone and contact any of these helplines. I personally, myself, at one of my darkest points, contacted the Samaritans, and it completely changed my outlook and got me out of a really deep, dark place. A problem shared really is a problem halved. So if you don't feel confident talking to those around you, check out any of these organisations and give them a call. This is my Facebook group. Just simply search on Facebook, Men and Their Emotions. It's for men only. But once you're in there, you can talk anonymously about your problems and help others and just feel a little bit of community. So come join the conversation, Men and Their Emotions, on Facebook. Thanks for watching.
Menace to sobriety. Just a menace. Just a menace. Just a menace. Menace to sobriety. Just a menace. Just a menace.